are listening to Regeneration Rising, a podcast from Quivira Coalition's new agrarian program that provides information and inspiration to agrarians beginning their journey in regenerative agriculture. Each episode will explore what it means to work in regenerative agriculture, how people come to choose this as their livelihood, and why it's important to them and our future. We hope this podcast provides a foundation of knowledge for future agrarians and land stewards so they can rise up and focus on a regenerative approach to community, relationships, and the land.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Regeneration Rising. I'm Taylor Muglia, and I'm excited to welcome our guest today. Her name is Olivia Raine, and she's the owner-operator of Raine Grazing Services in Western Washington. She uses goats for vegetation and invasive species management on a variety of properties in her county and has utilized local programs like LandLink and Enterprise for Equity to craft a business that really works for her. Olivia has had previous iterations of her business, and the reason I love this conversation so much is because it really breaks that paradigm of like, we tried it, it didn't work, let it go. I think that Olivia really shows that a business can evolve over time and really look differently with that same drive, that same purpose. And she even moved states to find the right place, the right people, the right conditions for her business to really work. So I just find her story so interesting, and I hope you do too. So before we get started, I'd like to mention another podcast we think you'll enjoy if you enjoy Regeneration Rising. It's called Nature's Genius, and here's some more information. For the first time in history, our species has the capacity to fundamentally alter Earth's natural systems. Avoiding this fate requires a radical change in our relationship to nature and how we view it. Nature's Genius is a new podcast series from pioneers that explores how the intelligence inherent in nature can help us model human organization on living systems. So you'll hear how we can repair our relationship with water and with a keystone species essential to restoration, the beaver, how forests can teach us about kinship and mutual aid, and how culture and language can enrich our understanding of nature's intelligence and our place within it. You can listen to Pioneers' Nature's Genius wherever you get your podcast. Just search Pioneers or find it online at pioneers.org. Okay, on to today's episode. We hope you enjoy. Olivia, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to talk to you. We've chatted a couple times before this podcast, and your story is so interesting, and I absolutely love what you're doing. Let's start maybe at the beginning. So tell us a little bit about kind of way back, like how you got interested in agriculture. How did you end up becoming interested in plants and animals and being outside in nature? Kind of bring us back to that time.
So hi, my name is Olivia Raine. I am originally from Southern California, and I was a very dirty child, just a very muddy child. And my parents, I'm so grateful to them for it. They got me into horseback riding. And that's something that I spent a lot of my young life doing up until I was out of college. And yeah, I would say I was interested in becoming a vet and quickly realized that my math skills and perhaps my people skills were not up to par for that line of work. And so I kind of just started searching around for the direction that felt productive, kept me outside, and I just wanted to feel I just wanted to feel passionate about what I was doing. I was studying environmental sciences when I went to college the first time, and it was very fear-based and reactive, and it just felt like this insurmountable mountain of issues and all these different facets of just environmentalism and humanitarian issues. And it felt so large. And so I went searching for something that felt proactive and productive. And that is how I found agriculture. And I spent the first few years of my agricultural career working on vegetable farms, perennial crops, but mostly plants. And I definitely have a deep love for plants, but I think in my core, I'm an animal person. And so something that we had talked about is that I needed more going on. Like, I love the plants are fun and there's a lot of weeding, and I needed a little bit more interaction almost with, like, not that weeding and working with vegetables isn't interacting. I needed more, and it felt like I
Mhm.
needed animals to kind of interact with. And I'm definitely not trying to talk down to veg farmers. I
For
love you
sure.
all,
Yeah.
and we need you all, and I appreciate you. And I also realized that it wasn't for me.
It sounds like what you needed was something more dynamic, like something that could react back to you and then you react to it.
It was like a in the moment reactionary, I think, dynamic that I was looking for.
Yeah, one of the quotes that you said one time that I love was like, "Working with sheep was enough chaos to make me happy," which is interesting because it says a little something about you. Like, not everybody loves that chaos, but I think certain people do, and I love when I see that because it is such a needed quality of people who work with livestock.
Yeah, you have to. I feel like you kind of have to have a couple screws loose. Everybody has their own screws that are a little
Yeah,
loose, and like the
yeah.
livestock people seem to have approximately the same ones. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so you got kind of started with in formal education and then you were like, "Okay, I'm going to go in the direction of farming." And then tell us about the first time you worked with livestock dogs, working dogs. Cuz yeah, you were saying that like you can't imagine people working sheep without them. What was it like to work with them for the first time?
I don't remember what it was like, what that feeling was the very first time. I wish I did. Yeah,
Hmm.
I don't exactly remember, but I think it was, again, going back to that reactionary type of dynamic. Like, I had the opportunity to work with dogs that are already very well trained, had been lifelong ranch dogs, and just the willingness and their own drive that a lot of the border collies or all the herding breeds that they have to go do something. I was like, oh, this speaks to me. This like need to like be active like really spoke to me. Yeah, I found that job. It was a sheep farm that they had a dog boarding kennel on the property to like pay for everything as like the financial motor of the farm. And then the passion project for the owner was a stock dog training facility, and they held sheepdog trials as well. So I was working there basically as a caretaker for the livestock. And so it involved working with border collies every day and moving different groups of sheep around to different fields. And I feel like I got really spoiled in that situation because the lady that owns that farm, she had had that herd for 15 years. She had that property for 15 years. And so her systems were dialed in. Her herd, her flock was dialed in. Like, the dogs were dialed in. And I came to really learn after I was out on my own, like, oh, it's like, this is not what the beginning stages look like. And
Yeah.
in that moment, I felt so silly looking back on those years where I was at that sheep farm, because I was like, of course, like, no, duh. Of course she has her systems dialed in and her flock dialed in. And I just, starting from scratch with very little money, I was very slapped together. But yeah, the stock dogs, it was this like multi-species dynamic that really grabbed me. And I think that was part of the reason I loved horses so much, is like people working with horses, and then people now like with dogs and sheep. And it just felt so wonderfully old. Like, it was
Oh,
just like this wonderfully, like, I don't want to say ancient, but like just long standing human dog, like
yeah.
prey animal dynamic that just felt really good.
Mm,
Yeah, it just felt really good.
mm.
So that was the beginning of finding my avenue into livestock, and the sheep and the goat grazing was through the stock dogs.
So you followed a couple other jobs back to California, and then you started what you call the first iteration of your business. What did that look like, and what were your dreams at that time?
I had tried very hard to work for some other people who were in the sheep and goat kind of targeted grazing world in California. It feels like it's quite robust down there as opposed to some other states. But I really believe in mentorship. And I knew that I understood like some very basic things about animal husbandry, but like I was very green as far as rotational grazing and kind of putting together the timing of grazing or browsing different target plants and bringing the livestock and managing them around it. And so I was really looking for a mentor to go work for. And I tried to work for some big outfits, and just for a variety of reasons, it didn't end up turning into anything long term. And so, not my first choice to go and start this by myself, but I'm going to do it small and with the goal of eventually having a financially stable herd of maybe like 300 animals that I could potentially manage by myself, and just kind of see where it went. And my intention was never to stay in California. I love California. I'm from there. I think it has one of the most like incredible breadth of biodiversity and different ecosystems. And I also just didn't want to be there long term. So my first iteration of my business, I was leasing some property that I was managing the pasture land with a herd of sheep that my landlord bought, basically for that purpose. They had owned hair sheep and that's how they had managed the 25 acres. And they were open to me doing that. I was like, great. And they also understood that it would be good for the land for the animals to leave. And I think that that's something that was super helpful to me, is that I had a landlord that was super willing to be like, yeah, take my animals, don't pay me, don't care, like go make some money with them. It was an amazing situation. Bless her, because she really helped me. And I bought some sheep of my own, and I had this little, like, there was probably started with like the 30-ish head, and then it grew, for a couple years. And I was doing mostly fire fuel breaks around residential properties. And the first year that I was doing it, I was mostly in this neighborhood that actually backed up to a property that I worked on that was a cattle ranch. And they had more fire, like wildfire, on that bit of ground than almost anywhere else in California in the last 10 years. Like they had so much fire. It was wild. And I was in this neighborhood in the springtime, and I had this weird feeling. I was like, they're going to have fire again. Yeah, as I was in this neighborhood, I was looking at these properties and thinking about, these oak trees and these ravines, and, we're working with the landowners. They had already had fire in that neighborhood, I think 2 years prior. And so
gosh.
these people are like really like, oh yeah, we could lose our house at any time. Like we're professional evacuators, basically. And they also understood that part of being like living in a wildfire prone area like that is making your house really accessible for firefighters to want to save. And my brother's a wildland firefighter, and he was actually living with me at that point because it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. Crazy times. So my brother was with me, giving thoughts to me and to the landowners. This is what I would do to basically make your property more savable, essentially. Yeah, because the firefighters, they all make choices. Like those departments, they make choices depending partially on what the owner has done to prepare for wildfire. So if you've got trees all over top of your house and you haven't done a defensible space at all, they generally won't even try because it's not worth the resources. It's so much more difficult. They put themselves in dangerous situations. Yeah, but if you've got, a defensible space, you've cleared some trees, whatever it is, the firefighters are a lot more apt to get involved to save your property. So that was kind of like going back to getting out of the environmental sciences studies and moving towards, like, it kind of poked at this, like, this was like kind of fear-based. It feels like a little bit of a fear-based industry, the targeted grazing industry, but also I've come to this peaceful place where it's like a lot of humans won't do anything about their situation until bad, terrible things start happening. And so it's something that I still kind of struggle with, even currently being out of an ecosystem where wildfire is a consistent factor. I struggle with that reactionary kind of fear-based part of this. But regardless, okay, so I have my sheep. in this neighborhood, they have fire that year. We have big wildfire. There was multiple fires that all came together, and due to the pandemic, the firefighting resources were just in shambles. Plus, there was a much larger municipal area that was on fire to the south. And so all the resources were down there. And the homes that I grazed around survived. I think there was one home that I did not graze around, that just its placement right at the top of this crazy ravine, and that home did burn down. And that man was so lovely, and it was a huge bummer. But I have some crazy photos from right after the fire happens where you can see no grazing, no management for several years, super black, hot, thick fire. And then it hits like where I graze the sheep a little bit, and then I've got this like intense grazing area right next to it. And you can see all of them like stacked right up next to each other. That was a crazy year of just, the pandemic was wild. The fires were just crazy that year. There was no resources. And I got to see what happened. Like, I feel like it's not often when you're doing any kind of like proactive work, like the purpose is to have the thing not happen. So you don't always have evidence or like visuals or anecdotal evidence of like what you just did working.
It's working. Yeah.
It did something, and the home is still here. So, correlation is not causation, but visually it looks pretty good. Yeah. So I ran that first iteration of my business in California for, I think, 3 grazing seasons. And yeah, I think I had about 50 head of sheep when I left California, and I moved all of them to Eastern Washington with me. But yeah, that was the first iteration.
Tell us about the second go at it. Why Eastern Washington?
Yeah, I had gone to school in Western Washington, and they're like 2 different states. Eastern Washington and Western Washington, just culturally, ecologically, like they're 2 different places. I moved to the east side of Washington state because my ex-partner was from there. He was from there, and we were moving in with his parents. Don't recommend doing that, especially with a lot of dogs and livestock.
Like a whole new chapter in life and like lots of livestock. That's a lot. Yeah.
It was a lot. It was very difficult. They had a little bit of acreage. There's a lot of cheatgrass in Eastern Washington, and there's also a lot of vineyards. And so I hadn't made very much money when I was doing this in California. I hadn't been charging very much. I didn't have very many animals to move through that much acreage. And I also had like 2 or 3 part-time jobs. It was a little crazy. I had a lot going on, but all jobs that kind of allowed me to leave at a moment's notice if I needed to. And that was something that I identified really early on, that if I was going to have sheep or goats or anything on other people's land, I needed to be able to leave if anything was happening. Which is very hard to do with a lot of jobs. And so they were all on my own time or agricultural base, where I could go to my boss and be like, hey, I know you understand because I just took care of this for you this morning. So
yeah,
your X, Y, and Z was out, and I put them back, and now my sheep are out. So
yeah,
I need to go.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, second iteration, vineyards, making some money, making some moves in life. I was in my late 20s at that point, and I got dumped. I got broken up with. That's what really happened, is that I got broken up with, and I was in a financial free fall after having moved out of California, realizing how much hay I was going to have to buy, not integrating into that community well, or just as easily as I did in California. I was having a really difficult time. And so I sold my whole flock of sheep. And that was before I got broken up with. I was trying to stay there. There was a whole bunch of other things. Anyways, I had to sell my sheep. And that was probably one, like, top 3 most heartbreaking things I've ever had to do. I got my business license when I still had my sheep, and I was going to vineyards. I was talking to a lot of vineyards. A lot of them were considering doing cover crops. and we're kind of looking around at different ways of managing those cover crops. And so basically that was as far as the second iteration got, was that I was talking to vineyard managers, and I was trying to gauge what the potential interest would be. Yeah, and then my life fell apart. So that was the second iteration.
I mean, it's like that's just life. It's like weaving in everything all at once, like assuming your relationship's going to go really well and then finances are going to go well and this business is going to weave into it. Those are such different things. They're one of them is bound to have difficulty at the time the other one is doing well, and it just doesn't like weave together like you want it to. And it's a really huge issue for a lot of the young people that I talk to on this podcast, is like trying to find a relationship that really gels well with, trying to find a relationship in general. First of all, like it's really hard.
Rough. Rough.
And then doing it on top of like finding somebody who you may work with, or may have to be okay with the work that you do, or where your work is going to be. And it's just so much that has to line up. And yeah, I feel like relationships are actually the thing that drives so many of people's stories on this podcast. And so yeah, when you were saying that, I was like, yeah, it's so heartbreaking, and it's such a huge pivot in your life, but oh my gosh, it's so common. I hear it all the time.
I mean, ultimately I'm really grateful. I'm not grateful that I sold my sheep in that whole situation, but I'm grateful for everything except that. Yeah, I'm grateful for everything that happened except that. Yeah, people, their life choices change, and it's a scary thing to trust that and just hope that, this person that you're choosing to be around in a really vulnerable way, that if they're gonna change their life trajectory, that they talk to you about it. And if they don't want to live the life, if he wanted a 9-to-5 job, white picket fence in the suburbs, and he wanted to go camping every weekend, and I was like, and kids, and I was like, that's great, and I wish you best of luck in life, because I don't want any of those things, and that's fine, and like that's cool, but this is not going to work, and let's not force this. Like, let's be done. You can't fall in love with potential, and like it's so exciting to do that, whether it's a person or an opportunity, life choices. Like, you kind of have to follow the potential, because that's what keeps at least me going sometimes, is the potential for whatever I'm wanting to make happen for myself. But also, like, you have to be realistic and like,
yeah, it is what it is.
Let stuff go if it's not working.
Yeah. Oh, that's a huge lesson that you learned. And like, that is a huge thing I think for partners of people in agriculture and people in agriculture at large. Like, I think there's a lot of people who it is really tempting for that lifestyle of sort of like quote unquote predictability, even though it's also can be really unpredictable. But yeah, just like having that 9-to-5, wanting to go camping, getting to choose when you get to go outside, not having to like get up and get out every day. Yeah, that's huge. And not everybody wants that. And so I'm happy that you were able to make the decision that you did want to be farming, and you did want that lifestyle that's like just different from a lot of other people. So yeah, tell me about what that turned into. So you sold your sheep, and like tell me where it led to next.
So I sold my sheep. I had 2 border collies at the time and a guard dog. So I took my herding dogs, and then I have a house dog as well. So I basically ran from the east side of Washington to the west side of Washington, where I had gone to school and still had community. And I left my like 6 sheep or whatever it was and my guard dog with my ex. I had bought all this hay, and I was like, the least you can do is
just keep them alive for a little bit. Yeah.
I won't blame you if something bad happens, but I didn't have a place to put them.
Of course. Yeah.
And yeah, I was just an emotional free fall. So I found a place that would let me move in with 3 dogs. I moved to the west side. I spent 6 months through the winter just like crying, going through it. And I started being like, all right, so forget it. We're doing something. The weather's getting nicer. So what I figured that I needed to do was find a place I knew I needed goats, and I knew goats were far less weather resistant than wool sheep are. And I knew that I needed to find a place for them for the winter time before I bought any goats and did anything. I didn't want to deal with my own housing instability, let alone trying to instability for like a herd of goats. I was like, this is too much. I can't do it.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. You're like identifying really strongly with the goats, like
yeah. I was like, no, we're not doing instability. And I was like, I really need to find an old dairy farm. There was a huge dairy industry in Western Washington, and a lot of those old properties still exist, but they're defunct and there's nothing happening at them.
And lots of buildings, outbuildings.
Lots of buildings, infrastructure. Yes. We need the barns. Yes. And I was like, all right. So I started just this huge net of area. And I knew that I kind of wanted to stay around the South Puget Sound, basically Seattle down to the base of the Puget Sound. And I wanted to be living in a rural area for a variety of reasons. And anyways, okay, so I'm working with different land trusts, the Washington Farmland Trust, smaller regional land trusts, trying to find something. And I end up finding this property that I currently live on and house my goats on. It's a defunct dairy farm, and it's incredible. I feel like when I found this situation, I try so hard not to get my hopes up when I find opportunities, going back to that like falling in love with potential sentiment. Like the letdown on the other side if it doesn't work out is so hard. So I was like, okay, goose raba, we are staying calm. We're not getting wrapped up in this. And I interviewed a bunch of people because it's kind of a caretaking position and tenant. It's about 65-acre property owned by some wealthy duck hunters. And this is their like private playground essentially. And it worked. I got the property. I've been living here for almost 2 years. Yeah, I lease an entire like 10,000 square foot barn. I have my camper in there that I live in, stored in there, and I have all my goats, and I buy almost all my hay from my direct neighbor. And it's just, yeah, I'm really trying to settle into this space. I'd like to be here longer term. But yeah, just finding the like winter accommodations felt so important to have that locked down before I even tried to get animals, because I didn't want to get caught in a situation where they were really suffering because I hadn't set anything up for success.
Good for you. That's amazing. I think it's pretty different out there because it's just so wet. Like
wet.
So that's the problem, right? Is like, we do not have that problem out here, but we have wind and snow. But it's a different story up there because you have a really serious situation if you get animals in a pen without coverage. Like you get a lot of foot rot, I'm sure a lot of like pneumonia with the cold and everything. So that shelter, that's amazing that you were like, this is a priority, because I think a lot of people were like, that stuff will come together, but you've got the pressure of like animals that are getting sick and you have to figure out where you're going to house them. That's just a terrible situation to be in. So I'm happy that you knew that from the get-go. That was the number one.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I think I partially knew that from trying so hard to find a place to bring my sheep basically back to me. And it took me a long time, and it ended up being a really obvious situation that solved the issue. But still, it took me months. And yeah, I just really did not want to get caught in this like disaster situation, because animals are an investment, and I spent my own money on this. I did not get a loan. And yeah, I really didn't want, for a variety of reasons, I didn't want them all to die,
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's amazing. And so right now you got a home base, you've got a mobile housing arrangement. So do you take that at these different leases that you graze during the summer?
Yes. So basically what happens is that I roll out in about early May with the herd and my camper. It takes me a couple trips. And I basically don't come home until October.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, last summer I was trying to get home once a week. I was like lucky to get home once a month for like 6 hours. I didn't sleep in my bed, my bed at home for a very long time. And that was my intention, was basically to be super nomadic with the animals all summer, make as much money as possible, and come home in the wintertime and just like chill out and do daily chores, take some vacations. I just want to say, if you have any dairy farms around you and they've got kids, they're the most responsible young people ever. The eldest child next door has been helping me clean the barn because he's been driving a skid steer since he was 5. And
better than any employee that you're going to find.
He's better than any employee. He shows up when he says he's going to. He's super responsible. Like, yeah, he and his sister and the rest of those children are wonderful. But yeah, my intention was to be really nomadic, work my ass off, basically 24/7 for 6 months, and then be a gremlin hermit hybrid in the wintertime. And essentially, I've been joking recently that it's really the goats' money, all the money that was made, it's really their money, and now I'm just feeding it back to them. Because my feed costs in the wintertime are they're not terrifying, but in a year or two, they're going to be pretty scary. And so I start looking at projects, and I start being like, this is my feed bill project. And, this project and this project, like, they're going to pay the feed bill. And, my intention is to like set up like a feed bill bank account. But yes, so I'm very nomadic with them. I don't really take off any time in the summertime. I live with them. Yeah.
It sounds like you were like, all right, iteration number 3, let's freaking do this.
Do it!
Yeah, you were like, I know what to do, what not to do. And so you used a lot of different resources. So one of them was like the Washington Farmland Trust and FarmLink. And then you used another business training called Enterprise for Equity, correct?
Yes.
And
yes.
Tell me a little bit about those resources, like how they set you up for success in your operation.
So I had become accustomed with FarmLink programs when I was in California. They have a very robust one that has like all these facets. They helped write a lease, like an agricultural lease. I had never considered that, and they helped us write it, and it's beautiful. And it actually became the base for like, I tweaked it for a couple other leases because it was so well-rounded. But yeah, how I found my current property is through the Washington FarmLink's Farm to Farmer program. And that's essentially a farm link program. And yeah, wonderful. And like I said, I worked with some other smaller, more regionally based kind of farm link programs. There's a lot of small farms in this area. And so the kind of like agricultural support or like adjacent support is pretty robust here. And I feel really grateful for that. Yeah. Right. Okay. My first year of the 3rd iteration was a financial catastrophe in some respects. I definitely did not make money. I did not know. I had never run my numbers. I did not know how much I needed to be making, per week or per day. And I was just winging it. I knew that I needed to really buckle down into what I needed to do to support myself, pay my rent, pay the feed bills, and with the intention of like having some savings. I'd love to buy property one day. So that's the personal goal. And yeah, first year was a catastrophe. I wasn't living with the goats at that time. So my transportation costs were astronomical. The only vehicle that I have is my big pickup truck. And I just want to say that the feeling of getting a call that your animals are out and you're an hour away and they're in a major metropolitan area is terrifying.
I think that's like the first thing we all think of when we think of goat, like the mobile goat grazing thing is like, yeah, that's it. That's the fear. That's like the worst.
It's so gut-wrenching, and I got so lucky. My animals were so kind to me. I only got chewed out by 2 people. At the end of that year, I was on a project that I greatly underbid. I was totally financially screwing myself over. And it was a situation, and I went and bought a camper, and I was like, okay, obviously I knew this is how the people that I had been in deep contact with in California and all over the Western United States, like 99% of them have either themselves or somebody else on site all the time. And this is why, because when something goes wrong, it goes wrong really quickly. And if you're even at the grocery store, it's still like that catastrophic moment it's the blink of an eye. And so, yes, I started living with the goats. And that's my thing now. I kind of disappear, makes my friends miss me more. Like I have a calendar that I share with a couple of them if somebody wants to like come hang out with me.
Oh, cool.
My parents came and visited me while I was on one of these projects. I'm not a very nomadic person. There's some people that are really drawn to that like wanderlust kind of lifestyle, and I'm not. But I've also realized that I will go stir crazy on a single property. I also realized I got super off topic.
Oh, it's okay. That's okay.
Okay, going back to the topic. So enterprise for equity. I love group accountability. I love showing up for other people. And I love the motivation that like getting the task done that everybody has been assigned to do for themselves. It works for me. And so enterprise for equity is this regional, it's a nonprofit, I believe, and they offer different business courses. And so that's their whole thing, is that they offer different programs for artists, different types of businesses, mostly like young businesses is who their kind of target audience is. And so they run, I think it's one program a season, and there's usually like 10 people in it. And so, yeah, it's a very comprehensive 10-week program. And the group accountability really, it did do it. It helped me so much. Everybody kind of operates in a little bit of a gray area, especially agricultural businesses. But I mean, I was doing some silly stuff because I didn't understand fully or had my head in the sand maybe around like owner's take from the business account to your personal account. There was some sloppy things happening, and it took taking a business course and making a business plan and really digging into what are the tax, kind of what are the basic tax laws? How do I do this properly? What kind of support, from other expert or people, an accountant or a CPA, what other kind of resources do I want to bring in to help me keep the, on the business side of the business functioning well? What are my weak points? I hate email. I hate anything on a computer. So that's been something that I've really identified. But yeah, okay. So I did the Enterprise for Equity program. I have a full business plan that came out of it, a spreadsheet where I can move numbers around to see what it's all going to look like. Amazing. I needed my hand held. It's fine. Ask for help, especially because most agrarians don't do this because they love running spreadsheets with numbers. Like, it's so important because unfortunately or fortunately, depending on however you feel about capitalism, like we're all part of this system. We don't really have a choice, and financial survival is incredibly important. You have to at some point work on the business and not just in the business. And that was something I took that was super important. And the other thing that happened is that I had cultivated a relationship with another goat grazer in Washington who had been doing this 10, 15 years. And he called me one day and he basically was like, hey, I'm tired of being gone all summer, and I have these customers that are big commercial customers I've had for 10 plus years, and I don't want to leave them hanging. Like basically, are you interested in working out some sort of like contractor agreement, subcontractor contract, some sort of agreement where like I would do the work and he would bring me, not he didn't hand me those customers, and we have a whole agreement, and he he got a percentage of the fees from the projects. But I mean, he really built my schedule out in this huge way, and I feel like I skipped like 3 or 4 years of target customer growth because there's a lot of wonderful things about doing the smaller residential projects, and they're also kind of logistical nightmares.
Totally, because you have to have a million of them. They're so small.
Right. And you're moving all the time. And so the logistics of getting animals in and out of, West Seattle, of a suburban neighborhood, is difficult. It's difficult, especially when you've got your truck and trailer is 40 feet long in total, and you're trying to maneuver these streets and nobody has any patience. And I have a short bed truck, and then the trailer that I have has this big square nose because it used to have living quarters in it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Because it was an old horse trailer that I cut. It's been jimmy rigged. It works, but it's been jimmy rigged. But basically, I can't take turns very tightly because I'll bust out my back window, and so I have to really pre-plan my routes to make sure that I don't get stuck with my rig full of animals, thousands of pounds, and I have to really plan in time, like how I'm going to back into this tiny driveway and one shot because there's traffic coming, and they're trial and tribulations of trailering, of hauling, and, turning around is not an option a lot of times. Yeah, Craig Madsen and his business is called Healing Hooves. They're based out of the east side, out of Spokane area. I'm so grateful for that opportunity, and I'm like, I feel like to a point I made that happen for myself. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but Oprah was the speaker at my little brother's college graduation.
Oh, wow.
And she was talking about, good things will happen for and to you. And I kind of adjusted it a little bit for myself. And I was like, you make good things happen for you. And I write it down anytime I'm having a hard time, and I like put it on a wall somewhere. It's in my camper, actually.
Awesome.
I'm like, you make good things happen for you. And even if you don't understand why you're cold calling this person right now or making this connection, in a couple years, it might really turn around and turn into something beautiful. Yeah, my whole last summer was super booked. I had some really big commercial HOA colleges, municipalities that had worked with goats. It was awesome.
Oh, that's awesome.
I had little kids that would come every day, at least once or twice a day, to come like hang out with the goats. I had families that started making me dinner, a couple times because I was interacting with their kids. And the public facing projects really become there's this whole like educational aspect. And for me personally, it was super fun at the beginning. And then at the end of the summer, I was so tired of having this, like the same 5 to 10 minute conversation. But there was some really cool aspects of that. And just, getting to talk to so many different people. And one of the HOAs, it's this like 10,000 home HOA. It's enormous. And there's such a diverse community of like where in the world people are from there. And I really want to make like a QR code to like put on a little sign, like where in the world are you sending photos of the goats? And like, cause I know these people are sending photos, there's all these photos and videos. And I'm like, I know those photos, like all that is going all over the place in the world. And I'm so curious. But having customers that I didn't have to like break in was incredible, because the public facing projects that you do have to kind of like break the public in, they get in the pen, people are wild.
Yeah. I've heard
people do crazy stuff, and I can't really blame, the teenagers to some respect, because I would probably have done some bullshit as a child, but the adults really, wow, like they do some crazy stuff, So I become a little bit of a traffic cop also.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about is like the thought of an iteration of a business is really inspiring to me, because it has this notion of like this thing will change over time and it will get better, and don't give up on it. And even though your business looked really different and maybe it had a different name, you had this like motivating drive to keep honing it and making it better and moving it to a new place. And I'm curious, like what kept you motivated through it all? Like what kept you trying it again instead of, I don't know, ditching it and doing something else?
I think it's those screws that are loose, Taylor. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's something that it brought together a lot of things that I felt really strongly about and had spent a lot of time learning about. And I think to some degree, like a lot of people, or at least I myself, I can't totally explain why I feel drawn to this lifestyle. I do question my choices on a weekly basis. What I said don't do of like falling in love with potential, I think I did. I don't know how to explain like being drawn to livestock. I don't know. Um I don't know how to explain being drawn to kind of like the ecological impacts of invasive plants. I studied that before I got into livestock. I don't know.
It sounds to me like there's this thing that needs to get done in the world, and
Mm.
you want to be the person to do it.
Mhm. Yeah, there's some ego probably involved where I'm like, "Oh, I want to be the one to do it." And when I moved to California with the intention of coming back to Washington, I had this like self created pressure of like, I need to get back sooner rather than later so I can start my business. So by the time this industry really gets rocking, I'm established, or definitely a little bit of ego of like, I want to do it, I want to be the badass that does it. And then sometimes when I'm doing things, I'm like, this is silly, this is not badass at all. I don't know what I was thinking.
But it's not like an ego. To me, it's not like an ego thing. It's like it's just like straightforward. Like that's the work you need to be doing. That's the work that you
I
feel
feel
like you
drawn
need to be.
to. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to go into our final rapid fire questions. So, yeah, you don't need to think too much about these and you don't need to give me a long answer at all. Just kind of tell me what pops into your head. So, the first one is finish this sentence. Being a beginning agrarian means
Finding which niche tickles your loose screws.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you had a private chef to cook you any dish after a long day, what would it be?
Tiramisu.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love tiramisu.
It's for like the main dish. I love that.
So Pyrex fan.
Oh, just a big old Pyrex.
Just
yeah.
a big one.
What is one book on your bookshelf?
I've been reading the Clan of the Cave Bear series. So I'm on the third one, which is something of the Mammoth Hunters. I'm really mad at the characters, so I put the book down for a while. It's really bad. I can't even remember the full title, but it's the Clan of the Cave Bear series, and it's really, it's fun.
Awesome. What's one musical artist I should listen to?
So there's a blues musician, and his stage name is Taj Mahal. And
wait,
like funky.
Yes, yeah, cool. I have heard it. Yes, I have heard it. Totally, yeah. Oh, that's a really good suggestion. I will look into that. What is a non-ag related hobby or interest of yours?
I'm very crafty, but a lot of that has to do with wool, so I feel like it's still kind of ag adjacent. But I love felting. I love making different things. But I like skiing. I don't get out very often to do that, but I do love to ski.
A nugget of advice for other beginning agrarians is
leave situations that aren't productive and positive for you. I've been very lucky to not get caught in any scary situations, but I've heard quite a few stories. And so I think beginning agrarians sometimes fall into a pattern of self-exploitation where they allow themselves to be in, unpaid situations, which don't always, they can be very positive, but making sure that all of your needs are being taken care of if you're working your ass off, especially for free. You need to take care of yourself and watch your own back. Definitely.
I agree with that. Okay, my final question is, where can people find more information about you and your business?
I have a website, raingrazingservices.com. I have an Instagram. I struggle with social media.
I do too.
But it's there, and I do put photo. I think the last photo is from like 4 months ago. But yes, website. Awesome. and the gram.
Okay. Well, we'll put all of those in the show notes. And Olivia, thank you so much for making the time today. I know it's always, every day is different in the grazing business. And so it's nice to sit down with you and hear you tell your story. So thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing everything with us. It was such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Taylor. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you'd like to connect to the broader Quivira community of ranchers, farmers, conservation and government agency professionals, educators, nature nerds, curious consumers, and more, we're excited to have you. Our website is quiviracoalition.org, and in the upper right, click on Get E-News to sign up for our newsletter, where we share happenings and events, learning opportunities, job postings, and more. Also, if you're enjoying this podcast, please leave us a review and a rating. It really will help other people find us and maybe even find their next step in regenerative agriculture. Thanks so much, and see you next time.
This podcast was produced by Quivira Coalition in our quest to support resilience on working lands. Learn more about our work and how you can support regenerative agriculture and solutions to climate change at quiviracoalition.org. This episode was edited and engineered by Caleb Wenzel-Fisher. A Folk Story, our theme music, was made by Alex Cristoforetti, and we're grateful for our guests who take time out of their busy lives to share their experiences with us.